Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Harenque if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Monday, April the 11th, and today I am joined by what might be a familiar face at this point, and that is our own columnist, John Archibald, and our videographer, Anissa Latham-Brown. Now, today we're going to talk about something that was released late last week, and you might have seen it, and that is a new short film from the studios here at AL.com and Reckon, and with some help from our other brands here at Alabama Media Group. And that is a documentary called Pulled Over, Pulled Under. It tells the story of one family specifically who has been affected by fees and fines that we have seen in some of John's reporting, like he has done with the town of Brookside. Now, this didn't happen in Brookside, actually. This happened in Selma, but it's kind of a similar story that we have seen. So today, John's going to talk a little bit about that family and these stories that he's been reporting. And Anissa's going to talk about directing this film and what it was like to really immerse herself with this family and tell their story. So, John, I'm going to kind of give it to you and just talk about, what did this family go through? I've seen the film, it's wonderful, but it's also very sad to listen to this family and what they have been through, and especially generationally what they've been through.
Right. This particular family, Callie Greer is the matriarch of this, and she's been through a lot in her own life, and she kind of emerged from that and reconnected with her family after going to prison. But then when she started to see her own two daughters go to jail because they had to pay off traffic fines and to think of themselves as criminals because they got traffic tickets and couldn't pay the fines and ended up going to jail. It really sums up the whole reason we wanted to look at places like Brookside and elsewhere, because everybody can get mad at the fact that they can get pulled over by police for almost nothing and have things taken from them or having large fines. But it's often more difficult to look at those people who really suffer the most, because if you can't afford to pay a fine, I mean, if I get stopped for speeding, I likely pay the fine and move on and forget about it. And it's an annoyance. But if you can't pay that fine, you end up paying more. You lose your license. You lose your ability to get to work. You lose your job, perhaps. And you have to make a choice. Do you feed your family by driving to work, or do you not?
Well, I think that it's so important you say that, because I think one of the most moving parts of this film to me is when one of Miss Greer's daughters was speaking about her experience, and she said, "Look, I was in this really conundrum here because I was going to get a ticket." I already had a ticket. I was going to get even more tickets if I drove because I didn't have a license. So I could risk more tickets and risk going to jail. But if I don't drive without that license, then how am I going to get to work? If I don't get to work, I can't eat. I can't pay my rent. So there's no good way out of this situation, it sounds like. And once you get into this system, it seems like it is nearly impossible for people to pull themselves out.
It often is. And, a lot of people say, don't do the crime. Don't do the crime, do the time, whatever it is. But, it doesn't always, it's not always that clear and not always that easy. And so these choices are really tough. And Alabama Appleseed and some others have done research that indicates that, a real high percentage of I think it's 38, close to 40% of people who are caught in that web of fines and fees admit in polling in surveys that they, sold their bodies or committed some crime in order to pay for it, because that feeling of just being under this burden, always having to look in your rearview mirror, not being able to drive to work, not being able to get what your kids need to survive, really weighs a lot on them. And, people, it's just not as simple as keep your nose clean.
Anissa, I think that I want to hear your perspective on this story, because John has been reporting about this. We've seen his reporting in Brookside and other towns here across Alabama. You got to direct this film, which again is incredible. If people have not watched it, we're going to leave a link here in our comments. You can watch it. You can go directly to YouTube and watch it. You can also go to AL.com, watch it there along with reading John's column about the family. But Anissa, when you directed this film, you got to really immerse yourself into this family and into this problem. So I'm curious to hear from you. If you had, expected this type of reaction. I know that you'd probably kept up with some of John's reporting, but this was probably the first time that you got to experience this and hear from these people who were affected directly.
Yeah, it was really interesting to just sort of hear their stories and really just like kind of have them walk through all the things that they've gone through, because of course, like, even before John sort of really dived in with his interviews, I also did some similar interviews, just talking on the phone with Callie, and just hearing her story and just like connecting, just like on a human level, about just like what her experience has been. How does she take care of herself? What are the things that she does to sort of move forward? And so it was really interesting to like be a part of that, and like sort of take the things that I know John is really fantastic at doing, and sort of doing it in my own way, and then sort of handing it to him, within the space. It was really fantastic, and I'm so thankful to Callie and her family, because they shared so much with us. So many things ended up on the cutting room floor, and they were just so gracious to just tell us. They really like we were like family at some point. I feel like we were sitting in their backyard, and we just sort of became one big family, just sort of hanging out in the backyard. And of course, we're doing an interview with like huge cameras and everything, but they were so they were just so understanding, and they were so sweet, and were just like so willing to share, because they know how big of an impact this is to people. So I'm really appreciative of them.
Can
Well,
I just
and
jump
you
in and say real quick that it is Anissa drove this bus. Don't no mistake about it. So props to her for finding Callie and the family, and I was along for the ride.
It one thing that you did so well, Anissa, is the people who shot, and I know this includes you, but our other people who worked on this film and who did the shooting of this and the photography and all of that work are incredible. But I think something that you did so well was where you mentioned that you were working with the family in their home, in the backyard. You said you were just sitting around like family, and that comes across in the film. There are several shots where John is speaking with Mrs. Greer at a kitchen table, and it feels like you have been invited into their home. You are there. And I think that was so much more powerful than doing these interviews or making this film in a conference room, in an office. It just felt more personal. And I want to know, to you, did you make that decision before you met the family? When you met them, did you automatically just say, look, we're coming in your home, we're doing this, we're going to be part of your family? How did that kind of work?
Well, I think that it was a combination of just like working with Callie and her family, and just sort of trying to navigate, with how much time we really had. We were in Selma for around a week, and then Callie's family, her daughters, are in Montgomery, so we traveled over there, and that's when we were in the backyard. And so they were the ones that were like, y'all can just come over, like it's fine. And like it's funny because it's like the three of them on camera, but there's like probably like seven people in the house, and everyone was so gracious to just like let us in. Like I remember me and Taj, I think John also. Taj was our director of photography. We all just like went in the house when we first got there, and everyone was like saying hey. All the kids were around and everything, and their kids were also like sitting, next to me as I was like sort of helping John out, doing his interview. And they were sitting next to me, and they were supportive, and just sort of helping tell the story along. And it was like, the just like the balance between like, okay, you're off camera, like it's okay, but also like help them out when you need to, like, was really cool. So I really appreciate that whole family.
John, did you learn anything from this family that surprised you, or anything that you thought was different than some of the stories you've been telling about Brookside specifically?
I think they were really good representatives of the problem that we come across. And it's such a it's really because I've been concentrating so much on Brookside, and I've had this sort of hope and belief that Brookside, because there was such interest in Brookside, that it could make people more interested in the problems of people like Callie and her family, because they often, people read about poverty, or they read about people who have troubles like that, and they often don't have, it's often harder for them to relate to those people than it is an outlandish story like Brookside. So, I mean, I think they really, really represented the people I hoped could be seen, and it was nice to have their voices.
And so, what moved you most about this story, about this family, about just directing this film?
Um, there were a lot of things actually. I think, of course, just speaking with Callie and just like hearing her story, there were so many times where like the camera wasn't rolling. She's the same person off camera that she is on camera. Like sometimes we were just like, go ahead and roll. Like there's no point in saying like, oh, go ahead, action. There's no point in doing that, because she's going to tell her story no matter what. But also just like from the crew themselves, them being so supportive and like present within the space, especially when we're hearing stories like Callie's that are very like traumatic. Like she's sharing trauma, and like that's no small feat at all. And just being able to have those conversations with crew and people like John that were there to sort of listen to and adapt to the moment. I think that some people shared like they had tears going, and it was a lot. So I think that for me was really eye opening, like the types of people that you need to have to work with on projects like this, but also just like being able to form relationships with the people you're interviewing, people like Callie who are sharing their story, of course, like I said, like us being in the backyard was like a huge thing, you know what I mean? Like we couldn't have got there if it wasn't for, the work that we all did to sort of foster those relationships. So I'm really excited about that even being in the film.
Well, and that should also speak to both of your talent just as journalists to be able to create that type of relationship. And, I think that it's something that probably the three of us understand, but I want to make sure other people understand this as well, that it is so difficult to get somebody who has been through this kind of trauma, like Miss Greer, like her family, to talk about it, let alone on camera. It is so difficult for people to relive that. And again, especially on camera with their faces attached. I'm sure, John, you've talked to so many people throughout your reporting of the story who probably didn't even want their names mentioned, let alone being shown on camera. So was it, how did that kind of factor into this storytelling? Was it surprising to you that somebody was so willing, as you say, Anissa, to just talk where you don't even have to tell them to tell their story? You can just hit the camera and just let it start rolling.
Well, first of all, I always think of it as a real gift when people will bother to tell their stories. And it means a lot to me because, I think a person's story is, everything. And I love being shared. But that being said, getting to know Callie, I guess, it makes me realize that it didn't take any talent on our part to get her to tell her story because it flows from her so freely, and it's like it can't be held in. And she has experienced so much, and she wants people to know what she's experienced because she feels like it can help other people to know that. And maybe that's because Anissa had prepared her a lot for what we wanted to talk about, but I get the sense that that it just had to be told.
Anissa, anything to add to that? What do you think?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that I remember her saying like this is her testimony, and she's willing to just like, share. Like I think she mentioned like there's no skeletons in her closet because she goes and dusts them out every once in a while. So I feel like this is her dusting out, all the cobwebs, like she said. So I think that that's a powerful statement, and of course, like I feel like we were just sort of there to just have the conversation. And I'm very appreciative of John of just like being able to create a space where she felt even more safe to even say those things. So
Sounds like you had a
sorry, I leap in where I'm not.
go for it. No, leap on.
But to hear her talk, she's been through so much. She went to prison. Her son was killed. Her daughter died of cancer and didn't get the treatment she needed. And she's so full of forgiveness, and the way she talks about forgiveness, and the way she talks about loving other people in the midst of it all. That's not part of the story of traffic fines, for instance, but it's all tied up in that. And she to me, she just remains joyous in the face of events that would cripple a lot of us. And so I appreciate her very much.
What do you want people to take away from this 17-minute film?
We might have different answers, but mine is that that things that when we don't properly fund our government and allow people with badges and guns to fund our government, then we ask for trouble, and it's and people who can afford to pay the least often end up paying the most, and it's just not a just way to run a system.
Anissa, same question.
I think for me, it's just like assessing what the repercussions are for something so small. Like I mean, Callie told us so much about her life and all the things that she faced, but to know that her kids are just dealing with traffic tickets and are having to face jail time over that, the correlation and causation just don't, like it's not the same thing. It's not like they've done anything like, horrifying. You know what I'm saying? So just like hearing that out and just recognizing like this is the reality for a lot of people, not just in Brookside, not just in Alabama, but across the nation. Like this is just like a real problem that we need to address. So that's what I hope we'll get out of it.
John, Anissa, I know that you will continue to follow up on these stories and keep telling them for the people of Alabama. Everybody can read, again, John's column that goes along with this short film. You can also watch the film Pulled Over, Pulled Under on YouTube. We're going to leave all of those links here so you can watch it and you can read that column. This video, we should also add, was produced with support from Columbia University's Lippman Center for Journalism in Civil and Human Rights as well. So John Archibald and Anissa Latham-Brown, thank you both so much for your time here, for sharing your stories here, and also for just kind of telling us about this documentary. If you haven't watched it, I have to say it is phenomenal. Everybody should take a few minutes out of their day to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody watching, thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.